Well, hello. It's lovely to virtually meet you. We've both watched the doco a couple times now, and it's so beautiful. And so yeah, we wanted to take a bit of time today, I guess, to get to know a bit more about it, get to know a bit more about you, and hopefully share it to a wider community here in Australia. Because I think films like the one that you've been in is really something that the general public needs to see more of. Like it's so important. But to start off, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Let's all introduce ourselves. So my name's Theo. I'm a trans man. I use he, they pronouns. I'm currently studying medicine. I want to go into the medical fields, specifically psychiatry, hopefully work to improve a lot of young LGBT youths mental health and overall well-being so that they can flourish into this beautiful identity that they've been gifted with. Do a lot of creative work. I love self-expression and I've done a lot of my own individual work to get to this point in my life where I really feel into my trans identity and I've integrated it into every part of my life so that more people can see the beauty in it. And part of that has been alongside with Gavin. So Gavin is my partner. We've been together for almost a year, but I'll get him to introduce himself as well.
So firstly, Sharif, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview for us. I concur with the film. It's just a really beautiful documentary and something that we don't kind of ordinarily see. My pronouns are he, him, and I am originally South African. So I was born in Johannesburg and came to Australia when I was a kid. So I kind of have a kind of dual sort of nationality to a degree, but essentially kind of Australian in terms of where most of my kind of socialization has been. But like my roots are very much based there and still have a strong connection to place and people and history in lieu of that. Most of my kind of experience has been in film production. So I work as an editor at the ABC, which is a sort of the national kind of broadcaster. I always had a really strong interest in film in terms of what my creative expression is and also obviously really aligned to the voices and the diversity that comes through our LGBTQI community. So I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you so much to you both, Theo and Gavin. As you know and shown on the screen, my name's Sharif Mutopeng. I go by the pronouns he, him, his. So yeah, I was born and bred here in Lesotho, in the Mountain Kingdom of Lesotho, the landlocked country in South Africa, with a population of about 2 million. And we only speak Sesotho, which is our local language, and English as the second language. So I'm an archaeologist by profession. I come from a family of four with two trans guys and two cisgender girls. So I'm the eldest, and the third one is also identifying as a trans man.
Wow.
So yeah.
Paving the way.
Yeah, that's unusual in one family too, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've been doing this advocacy work, I think for about 15 years now, while I was still at varsity. Well, I never saw any reason why I should do advocacy work because I grew up in a family that was very supportive, and I couldn't find out why I had to do advocacy work until some folks approached me to say that we need to start an LGBTIQ organization here in Lesotho, which of course I was part of its formation and its registration. From there, I've been doing human rights work to date, which is something that I didn't study at all. But it's something that I think I felt very passionate about, considering where I come from. So yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell who I am.
So going back to, I guess, your identity and sort of coming into that. Could you tell us a bit about when you first realized you were trans and what that process sort of looked like for you?
That's quite an interesting one because I, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandparents, I think, were not so strict compared to how kids are raised, where you'd find once a child is assigned female. Back then, there was very little limited information around human sexuality. At the same time, the only focus then and the information that was around was I only knew existed people who were gay and lesbians, and I thought I was lesbian then until I had an opportunity to be in one training where they did a training on binaries and boxes. That's when I started to know that there were people who were identified differently. And that's where I knew about the trans community and issues around gender identity. And I knew exactly that was where I belonged.
So for people who kind of may not be aware, Lesotho is actually kind of separate to South Africa. Can you explain some of the differences, say, between sort of South Africa and Lesotho for those people who may not be aware of the geographical differences?
Most people stay in rural areas like myself. I did grow up in the rural areas until I went to high school and varsity. We get to know each other. We are related to most of the people, unlike in South Africa. And for us, family is very important. We find that because we are related to most of the people where we come from, even in areas that we don't come from. The cases of transphobia and homophobia in Lesotho compared to South Africa are very low because I think also what makes it easier, I've seen it also, I think in Botswana, the fact that we speak the same language, it makes it much easier for people to relate and communicate. It's a very relaxed community.
That's so beautiful, actually. It's very encouraging and
It's so interesting because like I grew up rurally as well. I didn't have this exposure. I didn't know what trans people were until I had left home and moved to the city. But it's so interesting that you say your community really understood because here it's almost the opposite. Like rural has these really traditional aspects and ideas around gender and sexuality, and it's really like a no-go zone almost in some of these places. So that's really awesome that it's taken on so well by your community. And I guess it leads on to some of my other questions in terms of talking about the film. I was really interested about when you go and talk to your town pastor, and you mentioned before how talking to the elders and sort of taking on some of their wisdom. Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience and what exactly sort of was involved in that?
I think it is important to explain the fact that I had done a lot of advocacy work, both in the rural areas and in the urban areas of Lesotho before we started working on the film itself. So I had identified some of the challenges that our communities had, especially people that we needed support from. So one of the challenges was the fact that Lesotho is a religious country, and it is mostly, I think most people here are Catholics. So I felt a need to have to respond to the question around what the Bible says. And I knew that pastor, he was not from my church. I'm Catholic, and he's from Anglican Church. We're working on the storyline. I did recommend that we may use him in terms of his vast knowledge around issues of stigma and discrimination, issues around human rights. I think if I had chosen somebody who did not have a theological background, the story would have been different. So I felt that there was a need to have somebody with a theological background to have at least the knowledge around how the Bible can be explained in terms of responding to some of the questions that we had as we were doing some advocacy work. So for me, it was quite an empowering journey because at the same time, it was not only about the storyline, it was also about myself identifying as a trans person and what the Bible says. Because I had also experienced that a lot of our communities, they drop out of church, they stop going to church, they stop praying because they feel that the church is not accommodative enough of the community. So I also felt I needed answers. I needed answers in terms of what does the Bible say about me as a trans person, and what does God say about me in church, and what could be my role. So it was quite an empowering part of the film for me, and also to respond to some of the questions that the communities had.
Yeah, that is amazing.
I think it's always such a point of tension between religious dogma and human rights. And so, my thought around that has always been like, if your religion is, denying people their basic human rights, then you need to question your religion. And so I think it's really important to address that because it is very much the mindset of of a lot of people. Do you feel like some of what came through the film would really help people to understand that who are quite religious?
Yes, I did. I do believe that it helped a lot of people in so many ways, not only in Lesotho, but also in other African countries where people had an opportunity to show the film either to their family members or to the general public. Because usually trans people who are transphobic and homophobic hide behind the Bible. They will always tell you that the Bible says this, the Bible says that. So I think that part of the film itself did respond to some of the questions that people had, because also a lot of parents felt that they were torn in between their religious beliefs and the support for their own kids.
I was really inspired by your activist role that you'd taken on, and it was really awesome to see you going in and talking to students, especially because I know I definitely wish I'd had that when I was a teenager at school, had someone older to look up to and see, hang on, there is someone else out there like me. Could you tell us a little bit more about what sort of brought you into that role? And I know we've touched on it a little bit, but was that sort of the driving force of the film as well, or did it just kind of come naturally with part of it?
One of the most important things to note is the fact that one of the schools was a Catholic school. So it would not be easy to get to a Catholic school and discuss issues around sexuality and gender identity to that magnitude. So we felt a need. I used to do a training for at high school level. One of the teachers in one of my trainings mentioned that they had a challenge with their students where girls used to fight with boys over girls. Kids were taking weapons to school to fight over girls. Like, it was really bad. So I felt I could take that advantage. I used that to my own advantage and to their advantage at the same time, to teach them around sexual orientation and gender identity, and how people can accept each other, supporting each other where there was a need. One of the girls who was asking the questions in that film was one of the girls we were fighting over some girls. So I felt at least there was something we had done. In as much as we couldn't manage to go back to the school to show the film when it was complete, because they had changed the school principal, and the one who was there after producing the film did not allow us to go back to school to discuss such things, because she was also a nun, and she was like, no, we are not going to discuss these things here. But the film was shown. I'm sure they have seen it, and
Yeah.
it has played a huge role in terms of what we wanted to address at that moment.
Yeah, I was really inspired by that as well. And I think also the honesty of the school kids in terms of their questions. Like it was just like they didn't really have a filter to kind of what they were, to what the questions were. And I found that was really beautiful. Did you come with the idea that you were going to do that? And were you both the producer as well as the original person who created the idea?
Yeah. So alongside the advocacy work that I was doing, there were documentaries that were done. Some of them came from Zimbabwe and some of them came from South Africa, of which I felt along the way that there's a need for us to have our own films in our own language so that people can relate with our own stories. That was where the idea came from. I did work on my own storyline that appears in my films, which was very long. And when you are editing, and I felt there were parts that I felt we don't need to remove this. I was very passionate about it, but at the same time, it became very emotional. I don't remember the last time I watched the film because every time I watch it, it brings a new perspective around how people feel about it. The production team was the Steps for the Future because they are the ones behind the cameras. Otherwise, I only wanted to share my story.
Were you able to get funding through those channels as well in Germany and through the One Steps program? Is that how you were able to produce the film?
Yeah, funding came to Steps for the Future, which is Dade Don's organization. So because they work specifically with films, so they did get funding to have the films produced.
Yeah, great. It's just interesting for people to know that in lieu of, somebody who might be watching it that has an idea and, who might be part of the LGBTQI community or trans and is kind of interested in telling their own story. So there's a couple of questions that I wanted to sort of end with, and then I'll throw to Theo. The first one that I had was there's such a there's so much work to do in the rest of Africa at the moment in terms of LGBTQI rights. What can we do to address some of the, huge gap for the rest of Africa that still really is stuck in ways that, will still be, violent against trans people and even gay people. And, how do we help that?
I think at the moment the challenge is the trying pool of funding towards LGBTIQ work, where now you find the religious extremist funding political leaders who fight against LGBTIQ communities, especially in countries that are going towards elections. It is now a trend. You look at Uganda, you look at Ghana, you look at Tanzania, you look at a couple of countries and Namibia, and a lot of work still needs to be done. What we need at the moment is a funding pool that is going towards advocacy work. We do have provisions within the African Union that support LGBTIQ communities. We talk about Resolution 275, which talks about non-violence against LGBTIQ community in Africa. But how do we use such resolutions to our own advantage if the very same leaders in Africa go against such resolutions which they are signatories to? Personally, we have done a lot of work. I mean, I'm 43 at the moment, and I'm very proud of the work that I have done in the past 15 years. And the work that I continue to do now, also beginning my new journey going into politics at national level, being an openly trans person. So we need to build capacity of people to have our courage to say this is what we want. This is how we want to shape Africa. But without funding, without capacity enhancement of individuals to speak up, we are not going to win this fight that is looming at the moment. And I'm very proud of my own country, Lesotho, in as much as it is silent on many things, but issues around homophobia and transphobia are things that once you mention anything, the community is up on arms to say no. The current political party that is leading in the government declared in writing that it is in support of LGBTIQ community. So we are safe for now, but that does not mean our other African counterparts are safe. And until every LGBTIQ individual is safe in Africa, nobody's safe.
Yeah, we're not free till we're all free.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important, kind of turn to take. But I'm just so encouraging that you are a voice in Africa that is really needed. And really just, thank you. Thank you for the advocacy work that you're doing. It's just so important for community and for Africa in general.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah, I'll throw it to Theo for the next question.
Yeah, it's people like you that really pave the way for the future. It's incredible. I wanted to, I guess, probably finish up with a little bit of a question that I often get asked, and I think it's really important, especially for viewers. How would you say that you can be, just as a general member of the public, a better ally towards trans and gender diverse people? What's your biggest advice there?
My biggest advice is to respect people's choices, to respect people's differences, because we are all different. So one of the challenges that the trans community is faced with, speaking from the personal experience, is where people just choose to misgender you or degender you or call you by your dead name because they just cannot change. They cannot accept who you are. So that in itself, it's very heartbreaking. The best people can do is to respect people and respect people's spaces and respect people's pronouns, respect people's names, respect people's identities. In that way, I think we can have a world where everybody is happy, everybody is enjoying their rights wherever they are, because I think it can make a world that we can all live in harmony.
Absolutely.
Oh, I feel like I'm going to cry a little bit. It's so beautiful, Sharif. Thank you so much. Such a big-hearted man and clearly really pragmatic and intelligent in terms of your response to, what is a really important, contribution to the LGBTQI community. So thank you for that and for your time. I guess one last question: do you have any other films that's kind of in the pipeline, and are there more things that we can expect to see from you?
I did talk to the production team about, because I had just embarked on my journey around being a political leader, where I took part in the past general elections as a candidate in one of my constituencies. So I would love to document that journey and see where it is taking me to, because at the same time, one thing that we keep fighting for is visibility. We need to also be part of policy making and policy changes. So if we don't do that, nobody will do it for us. So I would love to document that and see where it is taking me to, because I'm busy now preparing for the next elections in 2027 to see if I'll make it to Parliament. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll make it to Parliament the coming elections.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, really supportive of that. I'd love to get the money to come and film that for you. That would be such an amazing documentary. So let's we'll never know what the future holds. Hey, so thank you, Chief. Good luck with the candidacy, an important voice. And so glad that you are stepping up and being brave enough to say, hey, this is the change I want to make in the world. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you from the South African Film Festival also. Ricky, who's the festival director, approached me for this, and so just a big thanks from all of us and the board as well. So thank you.
It is always nice to hear from people and to get to respond to their questions in person. And also it keeps on encouraging us to keep doing the work. But unfortunately for this one, we cannot be there physically, but hopefully in the near future we'll get to we might manage to see each other in the if we start working on the next film.
Yeah,
definitely,
absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharif.
All right, thank you so much, guys.